This is a help video to help you try and figure out some of those questions about how changing x affects the value of y. And I'm going to use this type of a graph as my example. This is the type of graph where we see as x gets bigger, y gets bigger, but it's not directly proportional. It's not a line. In fact, you might know that this kind of relationship is sort of this y squared is mx plus b. But if we look at our graph, there is no b. The y-intercept is 0. So we just say, oh, it's really y squared equals mx. Another way of saying this is y squared is directly proportional to x. For some of you, that's enough to get you through the idea of trying to figure out what happens to x, how changing what happens to x. Let me start that sentence again. For some of you, that might be enough to figure out how changing x affects y. You might be able to just look at this equation and say, wow, if I bring x up, it's going to bring y squared up. If I double x, it doesn't double y, it doubles y squared. If I make x 9 times bigger, it doesn't make y 9 times bigger, it makes y squared 9 times bigger. And then you can figure out what has to happen to y. But for a lot of us, it's not enough just to see the graph and to see the equation. We need a strategy. So I want to give you one strategy. And the sample I want to use is to ask, what happens when x here is made 4 times bigger? We know that as x gets bigger, y gets bigger, but it doesn't get bigger directly. Y doesn't get 4 times bigger. So we need a strategy here. And one of my favorite strategies is just to make up numbers and just see what happens. So I'm going to make up 2 sets of numbers, one with an x to start and one with an x that's 4 times bigger. My first set, I just made this up. I said, let's pretend m is 1. Let's pretend x is 1. And let's substitute in. We know y squared is mx. So I'll substitute in made up m is 1, made up x is 1, y squared is 1. I can take the square root of that and say y is 1. That's all made up. That doesn't help me enough until I go, now I have to say, what happens if I take my made up x and make it 4 times bigger? So I do another set of numbers. Same m, but my x is now 4 times bigger. And I'll substitute in my expression. Y squared is mx. Y squared is directly proportional to x. I sub in my 1. I sub in my now 4 times bigger x value. And I see that y squared is 4. And so y is now 2. And that's not enough until I compare back to the original. So my final step is to compare the new y over here to the old y over here, and that's when I notice that y is twice as big. So with this starting equation, making x 4 times bigger makes y twice as big, which might make sense because when y is twice as big, y squared is going to be 4 times the original. And so the x isn't directly proportional to y, it's directly proportional to y squared. Again, a good strategy for this is to make up one set of numbers and then change the set of numbers to see how that affects your final answer.